So I figured the best way to go was to contact the media. And there was a reporter from a local paper who had been covering this from the very beginning. And she's a very professional, very organized person. And she had been a part of this case for a very long time, just observing and watching it, until the day her editor got a phone call. And her editor called her into the office, and he told her, drop this case. You know, just drop this case. And that's the first thing that the Watchtower tries to do, is put a vacuum around everything, because they want to prevent the public from knowing that they could be involved in a legal case or involved in something criminal. So they systematically put everything in a vacuum and seal it up, and then they spend all their time trying to make sure that there's no leaks, no holes, no tears, no rips, and that's their whole thing, trying to contain a situation and prevent the outside world or regular people walking down the street from knowing, you know, that they're possibly involved in something. And so I had contacted all kinds of reporters. I spoke with a producer for NBC. I spoke with a couple of reporters in Los Angeles. I spoke with a couple of professors, law professors. And it's what we discovered is no one wants to touch a story that's not politically correct, or that could possibly expose corruption within the police department or the courthouse or something. Nobody wants to touch that. Okay? And I spoke with a reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle, and we spoke off the record, and he basically told me, everybody knows this story. Everybody. But nobody's going to touch it, because this is the kind of story that'll kill your career. And I was like, wow. And that's when I realized and learned that everything you see on television, newspapers, or what you hear on the radio, or whatever, this is only the news that's politically correct and that they allow you to see. It's kind of an unwritten rule with journalists and reporters, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area. You do not cover stories involving corruption within the courthouse or possible corruption within the police department. You just don't do it. And this particular reporter told me that. I persuaded him to talk to me. And he leveled with me, and he told me. He said, yeah, I know all about this story. He said, in fact, every reporter here in the local Bay Area, everybody knows about this, but nobody's going to touch it. And it basically came down to, you know, we don't want to deal with the wrath of the Watchtower, because, you know, you write any article that's not flattering or unflattering about the Watchtower, and they will come after you. And that's what everyone has been afraid of. You know, they're afraid that, you know, it doesn't matter that they're, you know, they have facts, court documents to back up whatever they write. It's just, we don't want the Watchtower lawyers coming after us. And in fact, that's what one of the police officers at the Menlo Park Police Department, when we realized that they weren't actually going to charge any of the parties that were involved with the identity theft, with them stealing Jason Cobb's identity, when we realized that they weren't going to charge anyone, one of the investigators basically said, you know, I don't want the Watchtower lawyers after me, and if we do this, they're going to come down on us. And I'm sitting there thinking, you're the police department, okay, and you're afraid of the Watchtower? And I just thought to myself, my God, are we dealing with the mafia? I mean, what the hell? It was just, you know, and this is the thing that you know, we learn. You see this in movies and whatnot, but that's not real life. Nobody wants to cross the pond. Nobody wants to rock the boat. and it's politics. It's basically politics, you know. It's sad, but that's just the reality, you know. And every now and then you'll read a story in the paper about corruption or what have you. But what I've learned is, if you're reading a story about corruption in the newspaper, or you see it on the news or whatever, it's because it was so obvious that by not writing a story or covering it as a news item, it would look obvious that you're ignoring it. So yeah, it was it's been a learning experience. Yeah, that's probably the number two question that I get quite a bit. You know, knowing what I know now, would I do it all again? And you know, this is a question that I've usually shied away from answering, because I don't want to fall on one side of the fence or the other. But to be absolutely honest, knowing what I know now, would I have taken this ride with them? Yeah. I think the only thing I would have done differently is I probably would have acted more aggressively from a legal standpoint. Document preparation, legal arguments, I probably would have been way more aggressive. Not that it may have mattered, since it seems like the Watchtower can manipulate, you know, even the courts. But yeah, the answer is yes. Knowing what I know now, yeah, I would have taken this ride, you know, without hesitation again. You know, has it cost me a lot personally? Yeah, I lost a house, well, an apartment, a very nice apartment. I lost a girlfriend of 10 years. I lost a great job. You know, I had a nice little business in Europe. Lost that. I lost quite a bit. And these are things I don't tell people, because I'm not trying to, you know, feel sorry for me. I'm a victim of the Watchtower. No, I'm not saying that. It's just, yeah, I lost a lot of things. And you have to keep in mind, you know, during the course of this 2 years, I had been diagnosed with cancer. And I kept that from them for 3 or 4 months. And I still worked on legal documents, you know, and I was terrified every day. I thought, if this is it, you know, at least I want to know I tried to correct a wrong. I tried to make the wrong things right, you know. And I was fortunate that I found a crazy surgeon who was willing to try a procedure that only 2 or 3 surgeons in the country would be willing to attempt. But all this was going on in the background, and most people don't know that. Nobody knows this. I had been diagnosed with cancer. I was in bed, literally, writing legal documents. You know, I had everything I owned packed up and put in a box, and my then girlfriend dumped it out. I mean, and there was no resolving that. And this is a woman who I had been with for 10 years, and she basically told me, I knew you were going to help with this case. We talked about it before you left. She said, but you got to choose me or the case. And I said, I can't walk away from this. I gotta finish what I start. I can't walk away from this. You know, this is something that's wrong that I gotta try to make right, one way or another. And she said, okay, you made your choice then. And it was painful, and it hurt like hell. But that's how much I believed in trying to do the right thing, and just trying to bring the truth out. Just trying to bring the truth out. And that's all we wanted. Bring the truth out, expose it, and the powers that be within the Watchtower will correct it, fix it, or do whatever. But they seem to be more interested in trying to cover it up, hide it, and prevent people from knowing about it. And if something spilled out into the public, then it was, oh, these are the rantings of apostates. Don't listen to this. You know, and it's legal documents. There's nothing apostate about a legal document. It's just, you know, they didn't want people finding out things. Yeah, there was a lot of things that had gone on behind the scenes. You know, I was sick half of the time, you know, and we were at each other's throats some of the time because it was strategy and deciding, you know, how to do this without seeming like we were attacking the watchtower. This is because if you look at all the legal documents, we never put the watchtower down as a defendant that we were suing. It was always individual people because we believed, okay, it's not the watchtower, it's just certain people within the watchtower, okay? And we'll help to clean out this cancer and get these people out of the way, and then the watchtower will be fine. That's what we thought. Now we think of something a little different, but or at least I do. But there was a lot going on in the background, you know. There was, and that's not even the half of it. I mean, we all gave something, you know. I mean, Arlen St. Clair's son was run off the road, almost killed, and I remember going down to the hospital. I took my camera and actually filmed it. Went down to the hospital and I asked him, I said, "Do you think this was an accident?" And he looked at me and he said, "No, this wasn't an accident. I was purposely run off the road." And you know, it's a lot of things that had happened. You know, Arlen's son has a 3-year-old daughter, and somehow someone took a picture of his daughter while they were out shopping one day, and that kid's photo wound up on a pedophile website. You know, and it was horrendous for them. They had to up and move away. They had to go into hiding. It's just, there's been a lot of things behind the scenes that have happened that most people wouldn't even believe, you know. But here, you know, we got a front row seat. So believe me, as crazy as it sounds, it's just the facts, you know. But we dealt with it all. You know, we dealt with it all because we felt for us it's more important that the truth come out, you know. But there was a lot, you know. From day to day, there was a lot. Again, there was a lot of things that we didn't expect. We didn't expect an organization that professes to be the truth to spend so much time trying to hide the truth. And here we were, you know, open, completely exposing ourselves and saying, here's what we discovered, here's the facts, here's the evidence, here's the truth. And then we're being labeled as liars, apostates, evildoers, enemies against the Watchtower and against Jehovah. And it wasn't like that at all. It was just, we were presenting a truth that the Watchtower didn't want to hear and didn't want people to know. And it got so bad that they were implying and telling people that by reading court documents, you could get in trouble. You know, you shouldn't be reading court documents because you're reading the rantings of apostates. And I'm thinking, how is a legal document something apostate? You know, but that's kind of the Watchtower's little code word to close people's minds instantly so that they're not interested in listening to what you have to say. Even though it might be the truth and you have all kinds of evidence to back it up, their minds are automatically closed. We didn't expect the viciousness. We didn't expect the threats, you know, physical threats of violence. We didn't expect that. You know, not from people who profess to be Christians. We just couldn't understand it. We didn't expect the multiple betrayals from people that we had talked to, known, trusted, and believed in. We didn't expect that. And I don't blame them because they have been programmed to believe that they're protecting the Watchtower. But in action, it's kind of like there's a scene in the movie The Matrix where Morpheus and Neo are walking in a crowd, and a woman in a red dress walks up, and Morpheus says, "What you have to remember about the Matrix is the very people that you are trying to free from this system will be the ones who will fight hardest against you. And that has proven to be very true. You know, we're not trying to give the Watchtower a black eye. We're not trying to topple the pillars or anything like that. Initially, we just thought this was a handful of people within the Watchtower who have been sneaking around and doing lots of illegal things. This is what we thought. But the evidence basically showed us it was a lot more than a handful of people. And it's a very delicate balance. And then they use people like Bruce Raditich, who's a security specialist, whose basic job is to spy on anybody who might get out of line or accidentally discover something. If you discover something within the organization that you're not supposed to know, then all of a sudden your name winds up on what they call a hot list. And Bruce Raditich will put your name on this list, and then all of a sudden things start happening to you. Like, you could get a parking ticket even though there's still time on your meter. You can get pulled over by the police for speeding in the parking lot of Walmart, which is impossible to speed in the parking lot of Walmart. But it's designed to harass you and try to break you. I mean, I flew out of the country and I was denied entry into Canada. And the Canadians are like, oh yeah, well, you have this DUI on your record or something from 25 years ago when I was fresh out of high school. And I was like, what? I've been to Canada like a dozen times. I've got friends and family there, you know, and I'm being denied entry into a country. It wasn't until later. One of my friends who happened to live in Vancouver basically knows someone who was a part of the Canadian Border Services, and they had a beer, and basically this person told him, he said, hey, I'm going to tell you off the record, and if you ever bring this up, I'm going to deny it, but, you know, the Canadian Border Services got a phone call, and we're told, don't let this guy into the country. And you tell people that the Watchtower has this kind of reach, and they think you're crazy. You know, Don Adams gets phone calls from people in the State Department. He's able to track and trace witnesses wherever they are, or anyone for that matter. And people say, oh, no, that's impossible. But you got to keep in mind, there was a Los Angeles Times article written 20 plus years ago where a reporter went undercover into the Watchtower organization, and what he discovered was that the Watchtower has created a very vast network that can literally spy on anything you do. If they want to find out what video games you're playing, they can do that. If they want to find out who you're emailing, they can do that. And these are things that they will use to come at you if you fall out of line. And most people don't know this or realize this, and it'll only happen to you if you seem to be stepping out of line. And then all of a sudden you're being harassed, or you're being labeled as an apostate or what have you. And nothing could be further from the truth, but these are the tactics that they use to keep people in line. And it's all based upon fear. And what we didn't really expect was to have people that we respected turn around and just lie blatantly. You know, what we didn't expect was, for example, Paul Kohler, circuit overseer. For years he claimed to be in the Navy SEALs, and you know, all of his missions and his life in the military. And we found out after the fact he was never in the Navy SEALs. And then when he was confronted by one of the parishioners at a local Kingdom Hall, Kohler said, oh, well, I never said Navy SEAL, I said CB. Yeah, I said CB. And come to find out, he'd never been in the military ever in his entire life. And I'm thinking, why is a circuit overseer, you know, would lie about something? Why would a circuit overseer have to lie about something like that? But it's all designed to keep you afraid. And if you start to ask questions, then all of a sudden they're saying, well, you're not being faithful to the arrangement. And, you know, you've got to basically stop asking questions to prove that you're faithful. And it's all designed to keep you afraid so that you don't start to wonder and ask things. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can do the research and find these things yourself. They're hard to find. They're buried out there in Google and whatnot. But if you look really hard, you'll find these things out for yourself. It started with a phone call, as most things do. Arlen St. Clair gave me a call one day, and he said, I just got a phone call from the ER. And my son's been brought in to the ER. He's been in an accident. And I was like, wow, okay. And I said, do you want me to go with you? And he said, yeah, I would really like it if you came with me. I said, okay, pick me up. I'll be out front and I'll be ready to go. And he said, okay, I'm on my way. And as I was going out the door, I grabbed a camera. And I really don't know why I did it. You know, I mean, I thought maybe he might need some photos for insurance purposes or something like that. But I really had no concrete reason why I did this. So we get down to the hospital. It was one of the local hospitals here in the Bay Area. And they basically get us through security and let us go into the back part of the ER center where he is. And the thing that struck me the most is the amount of blood that was on the floor when we walked in. It's one section of the floor was just there were blood stains everywhere, and it was very unnerving, very, very, very unnerving. It's one thing to see it on television. It's one thing if it's a stranger, someone you don't know. But when it's a friend of yours that you know personally, everything is more amplified. Everything is more so. And it just kind of hit me, and I thought, wow, you know, look at all that blood. His body was, it looked like he had been beaten like hell in a back alley and you know, mugged. That's what he looked like. And the swelling, it was amazing. I had no idea that skin can stretch that far. The swelling was incredible. He was sitting kind of peacefully because they had given him some painkillers, and so the pain was kind of a dull roar. And he was signing some release forms because he was going to have some x-rays and some follow-up work. But one of his feet were just, the toenails were mangled. I thought they're going to fall off at any moment. And his heart rate was fluctuating considerably. And it was just... And Arlen was standing there, you know, and he was keeping a stiff upper lip and everything, and you know, he maintained himself very, very well. That's one thing that this situation has taught us. Don't panic, don't get emotional, you know, check out the facts and make a decision based upon what you know, and don't panic. And so that's how we've always approached things. And so Arlen was very cool and calm. And he hit the pavement at about 45, 50 miles an hour. Fortunately, Arlen's son is a very safety-conscious motorcycle rider, so you know, he was wearing some very heavy gear, and that's what he said. That's the only thing that saved his life. When he hit the asphalt very hard, and at 45, 50 miles an hour, you know, you're gonna scrape. And I saw the suit that he was wearing was just, it was a shredded rag. One part of it, one side of it was just a shredded rag. And so, you know, being the devil's advocate that I am, I said, I gotta know something. And I leaned forward and I said, was this an accident? And he kind of cocked his head sideways, and he kind of stared off to the left, and he said no. He said, this guy sideswiped me on purpose. And he said, the only logical thing I can think of is I'm working on this case with you. He was a researcher, and he and I both started researching past legal cases that involved Patterson and the Watchtower. and we were trying to get an idea of strategy and the way that they approach things, and get an idea of who our opponent was. So we had researched a lot of legal cases. The Watchtower has been in court more times than most people realize, and we found a ton of cases. And so he felt it was because of his participation in the case that this was the cause of his misfortunate accident. And after that, he went into hiding. He literally, to this day, I don't know where he lives. We send emails to each other. He might call me on the phone, but he is deathly terrified because he feels that like he is being targeted by the Watchtower because of his assistance with this case. He lives in hiding. The only time he leaves his house is just to go to work. That's it. He's bought a firearm for protection, and he just, like I said, he's afraid for his family. He's got a 3-year-old girl, he's got a wife, and he's afraid that he's being, targeted by the Watchtower. And there have been some incidents involving Jehovah's Witnesses that he ran into while they were at Trader Joe's and various other outlets and shops, and based upon that and some other things, he definitely feels like Patterson's enacting a little revenge, and that's the thing that we learned through this whole case. If you're doing anything that can be embarrassing or make the Watchtower look bad, or if you're digging up information that they don't want people to know, they're going to find a way to get even with you. There's no turn the other cheek with these guys. No. There's no Bible principle. It's just, you're going to make us look bad, you're going to embarrass us, you're going to expose our secrets, we're going to come after you then and do some damage to you too.